Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Free Friday webinar. We have a lot of people that wants to come in today, but I think we need to get started because I know we have a lot to cover. So the webinar is automatically captioned. You can use the CC button in Zoom to get your captions working. And the webinar is, as always, recorded and will be published on our YouTube channel. And everyone that has registered for this webinar will get a link after we have cleaned up the captions. And all the microphones are muted to avoid background noise, but you are very welcome to use the Q&A function for any questions to today's speaker. And if you have any technical issues, please use the chat function where one of my colleagues will support you. Do not write your questions in the chat because then it's a big risk that we will not see them. And today we're going to talk about a project that we are currently carrying out and the project leader. And today's speaker is Sarah Kjellstrand, who is our research strategist and really boss of everything in research that we do. So please, Sarah, take it away.
So the topic today is something that I really like talking about, but unfortunately we still have a lot of problems in it, and that's the complicated digital world we are living in. And what happens is that we have more and more interfaces that are complex in different ways. So we have, for example, public authority websites with menus, both in the top and at the bottom, and with different calls to actions in between. There are other menus where you have difficulties trying to find out if we're going to search for information, read information that we haven't really asked for, or try to understand the menu at the top at the same time. And of course, there is the ubiquitous shopping experience where we have everything at once, with menus, pop-ups, cookies, call to actions, everything, all muddled up. So it's not a wonder if you get a bit panicked, especially in these times before Christmas, where everybody is stressed at all times. But all of these things are more and more difficult also for persons with cognitive impairments and who experience difficulties navigating in general, and that need more support, perhaps with memory or with reading information, understanding, or instructions. And this is where there is still a gap that we see, that persistently designers and developers lack the knowledge and understanding of how to make interfaces easier to understand for everyone. And the other part of this gap is that people who are experiencing cognitive challenges rarely gets heard. Since a lot of the legislation and the standards that the legislation is pointing to talks about physical access and how to access websites if you have, for example, hearing or visual impairment. This also means that a lot of the user testing is done with other types of groups. So that means that persons with cognitive impairments and who needs help on the cognitive area also gets marginalized within the whole community, unfortunately. And when we see a gap like this at the Funka Foundation, we think, well, if there's a problem, that must be a solution. So we will do a project on this. And in this instance, we have asked for funding from the Swedish Inheritance Fund to do a 3-year project. This is quite a long project compared to the shorter studies that we usually do. But we really wanted to do material that will help people for real to understand not only what are the issues in terms of cognitive accessibility, but also what are the consequences for real users and what can be done, because there are a lot of recommendations. It's not like this is a complete mystery. There are guidelines and recommendations that needs to be spread a bit more broadly. So the whole concept of the project is really that users will show what works or not. So we are doing this as a co-creation exercise together with users with different cognitive challenges from different perspectives. And they will show what is difficult and also what works. So we do different films with different scenarios. And the output will be educational materials for professionals. And we think that it will be useful not only for designers and developers, but also for people procuring websites and designing the overall structure. So in this first year, we have concentrated on the user research. So unfortunately, today it will be a lot of talk about the problems we see, not so much about the solution that comes at a later stage. But at this time, we looked at what are people doing on the web and in apps, and what are the issues that people with cognitive experience cognitive challenges really have difficulties with. So we have conducted interviews, we did focus groups, both with people with similar difficulties and also mixing different groups to see what are the common factors. And we have also sent out a survey. I got a good response on that, both from persons who identify as having cognitive challenges and also from a general public. And that was very useful because then we can see that a lot of the issues that people with cognitive disabilities react to are also issues that are difficult for everyone, but at a different scale. We have involved users from different perspectives. Just briefly, some of the groups we talked to: people with ADHD, on the autism spectrum, intellectual disability, people experiencing stress and burnout syndromes, dyslexia, older adults, people with acquired brain injury or aphasia. And what we see, and this is really the point of the project, is that there may be different perspectives. Everybody have their own personal setup of what they are good at and what they may need help with. But there are still a lot of common difficulties that we can see between these groups. And what we did was really to ask people very openly, so what are you doing on the web and what do you see as the main problems? And from there, we have been able to categorize these answers into different areas of difficulty. So it's not just about understanding. Usually when you talk about cognition, it's about understanding of the language, but we can see from the answers that it's really the whole chain of what you can do on the web and in an app. So first, to find the information, find out what you're going to do, understand the information, process it, and then also go on to do it, completing a task. And there are cognitive difficulties all the way through in this chain. So for example, for finding information, a key thing that keeps coming up is about navigation and structure, because that's the first thing you see when you come to a website. So what information is here? And then a lot of people are experiencing problems with unclear menus. And that may be that the labels and the actual words used in the menu is not clear. So entry means what? Entry to the website, entry to a specific section. Am I entering something? Not really clear. But it could also mean that the menu itself is difficult to find. A lot of people that we talked to found that the top level menu with the clear labels are easier to use than the hamburger menu. And that, for example, goes for older adults who may not really know the conventions, that doesn't really know that, oh, the 3 bars is actually a menu. It may seem obvious for somebody who's using internet a lot, but there are these conventions, and if it doesn't actually say menu next to the 3 bars, people may miss it. Another very common issue is complex structure, and that goes together with the organization on the information from an internal perspective, especially on public websites. We again and again see that, and the people who have structured the website think about, oh, we have this batch of documents and that batch of maps, so we just put maps and documents. Okay, but a user coming in is thinking about, oh, I want to find something about the marine environment or trash collection, and not really thinking in terms of what types of information is available. And this is especially an issue with bigger websites from public authorities that have perhaps different entries from different perspectives, and you have an overlap of different menus and structures. And if you come in from one side, it can be difficult to find information somewhere else. So one thing that we saw again and heard a lot from people is that menu options must be clear. And clear is really super clear. Give an instruction, not just write a word. So don't write application, for example, write press here to apply. So it's really clear what will happen when I press this menu option. And an example we found that has not been mentioned by the user researchers, but we found on a website from a tax authority is that they had organized all their forms according to year and format. And for users, usually what you're looking for is a form for a specific topic. You're not going for, oh, this time I really would like an ebook. Yeah, that seems right for me. So because then you really lack the context of everything if it's not in the menu. The barriers to understanding that people are complaining about are the usual ones. We see it all the time. There's too much information on websites, generally, both public sector and private sector websites. And this is not just the wall of text where you have like a huge chunk of text that you need to get through. It's about having lots of different pieces all the time. So going back to the example I showed briefly in the beginning, where you have a top level menu, a menu at the bottom, which is supposed to help, but give different options. So you don't know which ones you're going to choose, and a lot of calls to action in between, and also bragging about new information, or just sometimes both a shop and a public authority may feel that, oh, we want to make publicity for this new thing we have, and it gets on top of everything else. Ambiguous information is also a big issue that people are discussing. This is especially people with autism, but not only, so that a word should mean something specific. You have to give the context, so there is no ambiguity on what it actually means and what you can do with it. Internal jargon is also something that is very common, and we could see it, for example, on a museum website where they had to put a menu item that said digitalization. And what they actually mean is here you can find pictures of trucks. Okay, but why don't you just put picture of trucks? Yeah, you've done a good job digitizing all your photos. Good on you. But I don't really care what you did with it. I just want to see the photo. Or I didn't even know there was a photo. So internal jargon, lack of plain language, and too much information. These are things that we have seen in previous projects and that comes up again and again in the user research we did. So just briefly to say that the failing to get to the point with the wall of information is a common project. People cannot focus with the long text. And somebody said, well, why do I have to do your work to sort out the information? You as the website organizer, and you put up this, you have to help me find the information. I shouldn't be doing the work of sorting it out for you. And then we have the next stage. If you have managed to understand the information, there are difficulties in completing tasks. And here the opposite is true. There is almost always or often a lack of information. So there are incomplete instructions. So you lack the context of both in, for example, shopping experiences, the whole go to cart, what is actually the path to the actual click to buy it, and also in forms, service of different kinds, where there's a general lack of contextual support and also too many steps to complete. And too many steps to complete is a problem, both because people may lose interest and engagement and not have the energy now, but also a lot of people need to prepare. Perhaps you have a support person helping you with the information. So what really people need is to be able to prepare in advance, to know how long it will take to fill in something, and also to be able to do your text and just copy it in. For example, people with dyslexia may need to run a spell checker or run something to be able to help them to write it correctly from start and just copy it in. Also, if you, for example, have an intellectual disability and have somebody to support you, that they can prepare everything in advance and you can just fill it in when you need. And in a lot of cases, this is not possible. And of course, as we know, this is not really a new insight, but clear language matters from different perspectives. And I put clear and not plain because it's not only about the level of language, it's also about terms not being ambiguous. So, for example, a person with intellectual disability can say, I don't really know if I have the right word for this. I'm not sure that if I'm going to search for something, that you use the right word that the search engine will understand so that I get the right result. So in this case, it needs to be a bit more allowing in the search. A person with dyslexia may say that there are long and difficult words that throw me off the path. I really have difficulties trying to get through texts and be certain that they understand what to do. And for a person with autism, some, not all, there's a spectrum. Words and terms need to be precise. We've heard from a lot that they get stuck if it's ambiguous. Save. What happens if I press save? What action happens? Am I saving what I'm doing now? Can I pick it up later? Or is it actually save and submit? So it's really important to be not just simplify information, but to have thought through exactly what the words and concept you use means and from a user perspective. So what we can see also is that people with who experience cognitive difficulties are really the canary in the coal mine. The issues raised by the persons we have talked to who have experienced difficulties with memory or with understanding instructions, they are also experienced by other people and at large. It's just that persons who have a specific challenge in an area find the issues earlier and the impact is higher. So, for example, a person with autism may get completely stuck if a word is ambiguous and may abandon it. Whereas a person who do not identify as having a cognitive challenge may just, I'll sort it out, go through it, and then realize later on in the chain that, oh, in fact, I interpreted it as this, but in fact, they meant that, so now I have to redo things. So again, these are not specific issues for specific people, but it's something that is generally useful for everyone. And what we could see, especially when we did the user survey for everyone, is that in the responses that came both for the general public and for persons identifying as having cognitive challenges, one thing is really, really clear. Everyone wants more standardized websites with clean layouts. You don't want to have to learn how something works. It's just annoying and not cool to have a menu placed in the bottom left corner when you're used to seeing it at the top right, and it just gets so much more difficult to do things when you have to relearn for every new website you're going to. And I'm going to end this with a cliffhanger. So this is a lot about problems today, a bit of tips, but mainly the issues we found. So you will have to stay tuned for the solutions. We are now starting to do manuscripts, to do films with users to be developed next year. And then from these films, we will do a more proper educational material that will be free to be developed in 2027. And what I should say is that this is in Swedish. It's a Swedish funded project. We're talking to Swedish users. And we will probably do translations and captions, but the basis is really Swedish. So the solutions will also be sort of modeled on what we can see in our context. And then, as usual, please do reach out. We are always happy to get people involved in the project, and we are still gathering more stories. So in the Swedish project, we are talking to end users, and also with different organizations who may want to be able to access the films and the educational materials. And we have a set of pilot organizations already who will test the films, but we're always looking for more. So if you want, it doesn't matter if it's private sector or public sector, large organization or small organization. If you want to have an input on the educational material, then you're very welcome. Outside of Sweden, we are continuing the work on cognition, and any input and ideas are welcome also for this project on a more general level. So I think that's all for the presentation. We'll see if I have time for questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Sarah. I know there is we have been collecting a lot of information, and very good to do that in just 20 minutes. So, so thank you for condensing the information. We do have a lot of questions, so I'll try to make sure that we go through them. First, will the results be publicly available? Yes. Is this webinar recorded? Yes. So now the real ones. Is the project only covering public sector websites?
No, it's both public and private. Really, what we are doing is to see what are users doing in general on the web. So where are the issues? I realized now that I was talking a lot about public sector, and I think that's because when you talk to persons with cognitive disabilities, usually they are in the circle of having to deal with a lot of public authorities, whether it's health, insurance, unemployment, it's a lot of systems, and these tend to be very complex. So of course that's what you have top of mind. If you probably don't think, oh, I was FaceTiming with my sister and we had a glitch. It's not top of mind when you're discussing big issues.
Thank you. So I think there are a couple of questions about this take them together. So why isn't cognitive accessibility covered by standards and by the legislation? And then another person says, but there are requirements on understandability in the European Accessibility Act. And then somebody else says, what standards do you use as basis for this research, if any? So can you say something about the...
Oh, that's super large. I could just talk for half an hour on that. But I mean, it's historical. I mean, if you look at the standards that the legislation is pointing to, they were developed in a different time where the cognitive accessibility and cognitive needs were super marginalized. And then with standardization, as Susanna knows best, I mean, it's a long and arduous process where you add something. So there have been adding more and more requirements on cognitive accessibility. But I'm not sure I'm the right person to say why there isn't more. But there are. I think for when it comes to the question of what standards we are using, we are now redoing our website. So we will be putting up a section on cognitive accessibility where we can reference these types of standards that we are pointing to. I mean, there are ISO standards on cognitive accessibility specifically. There are plain language standards. There is also a lot of work from groups like the COGA group. There are our own set of requirements that we have done in specific projects before that we've user tested. So real requirements with also testable. And then I forgot there was a third nested question into this.
What are you? Yeah, there are requirements that are on understandability in the European Accessibility Act. That's more of a statement than a questions.
Yeah, there are and there is a lot. There are two new standards as well on the support services and non-digital information, which goes beyond web, and there is a bit more on the understandability on that side as well.
Yeah, so stay tuned. There will be things in the new standards, but I don't think personally that even if we are doing a whole set of new and updated standards, I don't think we are really covering what I was hoping that the EN 301-549 would cover in the next generation. It has been this version that is coming out soon has more focused on making sure that the EAA requirements are covered, but there is still a gap on cognitive, unfortunately, even in these new versions. So Are you also talking to caregivers and assistants to get their views in this project?
Yes and no. I mean, from a Scandinavian and Swedish perspective, we want to talk to users, really. So it depends on where you are in Europe, how much sort of emphasis you put on caregivers. For us, it's really users have the right to their own voice, and then they may want to involve caregivers. From another perspective, we also hope that these guidelines can be useful for people who are at the large, how should I call it, procurers, but not people just doing procurement on a legal point of view, but really who are working as supporting persons with cognitive disabilities and who are buying stuff, both apps and websites, so that they have more of an overview of what can be done and what are good examples.
But we are also doing some interviews with professionals like people, academics and so on. So there is a little bit of both in this project as well. So I think we can have one more. Can these issues or barriers be objectively evaluated rather than requiring subjective judgments?
Yes, I mean, I'm super convinced on this, and not just convinced from a personal perspective. We have done research also with developers and designers using the same kind of measurements that you use for any WCAG and legislative criteria to assess cognitive criteria. So yes, it's possible. And then if I can dare to go into a different territory, I would say that there are legislative criteria that are subjective as well. So you should do manual testing and not leave everything to automatic.
Yes. Okay. I think we need to wrap up. So unfortunately, there's at least 20 more questions that we didn't get to, but welcome to come back with your questions or write to us. So if you will share the slides again, Sarah, we can do the wrap up. I think we lost the slides, or are you sharing them now?
No, I think I'm still sharing.
Yeah, okay. So do subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on LinkedIn. I think Stefan will be sharing both the project website or the page on our website where you can read about the project and the updates. And also, if you prefer to have the links to the newsletter subscription and the LinkedIn. And then what else do we have? If we have the next, yes. So the next, we are now, well, we are not yet, but the Free Friday webinar series is going on holidays. So I hopefully everyone else will have really nice holidays as well. And we will be back with this series of Free Friday webinars on the 16th of January, when I think the holidays have been ending in all corners of Europe at least. So thank you very much, Sarah, for today. Thank you, everyone, for your questions and for following us. And make sure that you make something accessible before you close your computer for the weekend. Bye-bye.